All right, so I officially want to welcome everybody to the Virtual Cafe. We're going to be learning about Mpala Research Centre and hearing from Dr. Duncan Kimuyu. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yes, yes.
Great. And you've been with Mpala since 2011, is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
And started as a PhD student?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And so, and you've been, I'm cheating with your LinkedIn note. So you can probably much better than me. Been doing field work in Mpala for many years, and in part with a Smithsonian grant, correct?
Yes.
So I'm excited to hear about Mpala, and with that very brief and understated introduction, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks. That's a great introduction, actually. I'm going to talk about Mpala, but before I do that, I'll give a bit context of where Mpala falls in terms of in the landscape. And oftentimes when we're talking about Mpala Research Centre, we like to refer it as a living laboratory, in the sense that, yes, we have physical laboratories that we do a lot of research there, but the most unique thing is just having, a whole landscape where you can do many sorts of experimental manipulations. And it's a landscape with people, it's a landscape with animals, and both livestock and wildlife. And most of the research that happens at Mpala touches on all these different aspects: livelihood, people, wildlife, and their livestock. So in the terms of where we sit, you can easily call it as a living laboratory. Oops. So this is where Mpala is, the map of Kenya there. If you can see, Laikipia County, which is where Mpala falls, is actually in central Kenya, not far away from the equator. In fact, you cross equator as you come to Mpala. And in terms of just the landscape, it's on the leeward side of Mount Kenya. You know that Mount Kenya is one of the really tallest mountains in Africa, second tallest. And the fortunate bit or unfortunate bit is that Mpala Research Centre falls on the leeward side of Mount Kenya. What that means is that it's on the rainfall shadow, and very little rainfall. We're talking about 600 to 650 millimeters of rainfall on average, although this could vary a lot from one year to another. What that means is that you have a landscape that cannot, for better part, support agriculture, although there is an attempt to that in some portions of the landscape. But mostly the main land use in this system is pastoralism, and it's practiced at different intensities, as we'll see. So this is just a map of Laikipia, and as you can see from this map, Laikipia is a mosaic of different land uses. I said the main one is pastoralism, but then there's a bit of some areas that you can practice some bit of farming, crop farming. Other areas is mostly conservancies, ranches, private, and also communal ranches, and areas that are pastoral, mostly pastoral, owned by pastoral communities, and in it you also have some suburban areas. So Mpala is again right here at the middle of Laikipia County, surrounded by all these different land use types. These are the kind of animals you'd expect to see if you're visiting Laikipia. We have all sorts of large mammals, herbivores, carnivores, all coexisting in the landscape. And one unique thing about Laikipia is that there are really no government protected areas. What that means is all these animals you're seeing exist to some extent together with livestock and livelihoods. So there are few fences, but mostly people and wildlife are coexisting ideally in the same space. And talking about cattle ranching, we really think, or rather, we can really say that cattle ranching is practiced at different intensities. There is really in the private ranches where you'd expect there's moderate stock intensities. By moderate, we consider moderate stock intensity is when you put 1 or 2 cattle in 10-hectare piece of land. Remember again, as I said, that portion of land is shared with all sorts of wild animals. And there is highly intensive grazing where, particularly most of the group ranches owned collectively by the communities, where you kind of get densities far exceeding the moderates, what I'm referring to here as moderate stock intensities. While wildlife and livestock and livelihoods and the people have been sort of coexisting harmoniously in this system, we're looking at the future, and it's kind of uncharted future in a way that there's been increasing livestock densities, and you know that can be a problem, especially if stocking densities exceed what you'd expect the land can support. There's also widespread degradation, again tied to closely overgrazing and changing land tenure as you know, we switch from what used to be nomadic pastoralism to more sedentary lifestyles as people settle down around areas where there are social amenities, there are schools, there are hospitals, and all that. That changes the whole pastoralism regime altogether, from what we used to know it as nomadic pastoralism now to sedentary pastoralism. We've seen a bit of armed conflicts around Laikipia, and some of these again relate to just access to grazing areas. And drought is a major problem. We've just gone through one of the terrible droughts we have had, say, in 60 years, where for a period of 2 years, there was hardly any rainfall. And that has had consequential impacts on the wildlife and the livestock and also the people. I said Mpala lies basically at the center of all these. That's Mpala highlighted there in green. And we look at Mpala as uniquely placed to contribute to the future of wildlife, the people and livestock in this region. But also research that is conducted at Mpala helps to inform similar systems where you have wildlife, people, and livestock coexisting in the same space. This just gives you a sense of how Mpala would look like in terms of infrastructure facilities. Of course, there is more than we can fit in this slide. But just to mention, the research center itself has existed since 1994, and it's formed as a partnership between 4 organizations. There is Princeton University, there is the Smithsonian, and locally in Kenya, we have Kenya Wildlife Service, which is the agency that manages wildlife nationally, and there is the National Museums of Kenya. So these 4 institutions are in one way or another involved in management of the research facility. The whole of Mpala, it's 48,000 acres of land, and unique in ways that you can be able to do different sorts of experimental manipulations to test interactions between various aspects. And research that is happening here, touches on almost all aspects, ranging from microbiome research to even the biggest of all in the landscape, the elephant. So this wide range of all sorts of experiments that can be conducted in this landscape. it's a privilege that perhaps you cannot afford if you are doing this kind of research in highly regulated environments. You know, that's not a privilege you can afford, for example, in wildlife protected areas. So while we try to manage the impact we have on the landscape and wildlife, ideally, the land is open to different sorts of experimentation. This is a picture of me sometime doing some bit of experimental fires, and it just shows the extent to which, for example, you cannot just walk into any national park and set up a burning experiment. But at Mpala, of course, with the right regulations, you can actually do some of these sort of experiments. The research facility itself hosts a large number of scientists and students from all over the world. We can talk of, if we were to give numbers, around 60 institutions coming through every year. And this includes, you know, student groups, includes researchers coming to do one or two things at Mpala. Around 14,000 people spending night at Mpala. And most of the students that come are either MSc or PhD students. We have a few of postdocs coming through. And again, we also have quite a number of universities sending students for short courses. Short courses could be a 1-week course or even a full semester course, with students coming on internships, could last a year or so. And then we also have day visits, especially from universities in Kenya or just near Mpala. We have visits and often hosting students just to come and do a field excursion and go away. So this is just to give you a sense of the community, the Mpala community, in terms of scientists and also the student groups that are coming through. This is a picture of Karatina University students, just one of the institutions not far away from Mpala. And you can see the students really enjoying the view of hippos in the river. And often we are hosting such kind of student groups as part of, you know, outreach and also growing capacity locally. There are convenient facilities in terms of what we offer to students. There are lecture halls where they can contact simple classes, not big, but classes that can hold like 40 or 50 students. And the biggest strength being just being able to go out there and even conduct classes out in the field. We boast as one of the few research stations, field stations that are state-of-art laboratories. This laboratory facility is one of the new developments we've done recently. And in this space, we have genomics work happening all the way from, you know, sequencing to PCR, and even all the way from extractions, PCR, and even sequencing. And you can imagine what that presents if you can actually collect your samples, right in the field, do the extractions, do the PCRs, and even do the sequencing without having to export samples out of the field station. So that's really an immense opportunity. We're also developing the isotope lab, and again, several other labs will be coming up. In terms of research productivity, I talked about the research center itself was established in 1994. You can see as early as 1995, there are a few papers emerging. And while this is highly variable, you can, at the moment, talk about 50 peer-reviewed publications are coming out of science work that is done at Mpala. Research revolves around quite a number of themes. We're going to talk of savanna ecology, One Health, genomics, and all that as different kind of research themes. And all this involving, PIs and students from various universities. I'll talk a bit about some of the projects that maybe to give you just a sense of when you talk of research, what is happening. There is one of these hot projects, Zebra project, led by Professor Daniel Rubinstein. He's a professor now retired from Princeton University, and he's been doing this work for as long as Mpala has existed. And part of it is just monitoring zebras, both gravies and plains zebra, to understand aspects of their population, their movement ecology. And one of the innovative things that Dan has been able to do is the idea that you can actually uniquely identify zebras using their stripes. Their stripes are more like, our fingerprints, that every zebra has unique stripes. And what that is good for is, given any photograph of a zebra, you can actually go down and nail it down to the particular individual. So with, again, a lot of technology, you can actually run images, thousands of them, in computer algorithms and identify individuals to identify up to individual level and match this. So this really becomes quite instrumental, especially when you're dealing with citizen science, where people, not researchers, can take photographs and send them to you. Then you're able to run them and you can know this zebra was photographed in this particular place, and down the line you find it in another ranch in a different place, and that way allows you to monitor movement of zebras across the landscape, but also get you close to estimating their population. So as opposed to traditionally what you do, immobilize animals, put collars on them, with this kind of technology, you can actually monitor without having to really capture the animals. This is being used for zebras, but also for gravies, for giraffes, and basically that has unique stripes can be monitored using this kind of technology. Another project, amazing one, led by Meg Cromford, is looking at in baboons, and this is the idea that animals, just like human beings, are affected by various pressures in the environment. And one of the things that is critical to animals is actually sleep. If as humans we have bad sleep, we're going to have a bad day the following day. But how do you study sleep in wild animals without waking them up? So what Meg has been doing is she's fitting these collars with accelerometers, can detect even the slightest movement of the animal. She's also monitoring their sleeping sites using thermal infrared cameras, and using that you can actually see when there is disruption in these animals as they sleep. And then during the day, you can actually monitor them and see how, if there were disruptions during the day, during the night, how that affects their foraging and moving, and even alertness, again, vigilance to predators and all that. So again, another really amazing behavioral research. Damien has been studying guinea fowl for quite some time, and what he is looking at is really in a group of animals, who makes the decisions. Often we tend to imagine it's the dominant individual in a group that makes decisions about where to move and their foraging behavior and what to do in every time. But it turns out this is more complicated than just that, that even environmental variables are kind of influencing decisions, movement, behavior, and at a different environmental scenarios, say during drought, decisions may vary, or who makes decisions on movement may actually vary, is able to do that by using of collars fitted on the back of the birds. They are solar powered GPS transmitters and GPS collars, and they can actually download and see individual movement of every bird in the group and actually get to understand what is driving the direction and the speed and where they are going during the day. This is also another really amazing project, wild dog, African wild dog. You may know that this is one of the critically endangered species, very few individuals remaining in Africa. And there is every effort to, increase or just interventions to reduce further losses in the population. Wild dogs are particularly vulnerable in this landscape because they are, for better part, considered predators to livestock. And indeed, they do predation. And mostly when that happens, there's a bit of retaliation from the local communities, which could take different angles, including even poisoning. But then also, you'd imagine they are highly vulnerable to diseases. One of the fatal diseases in the landscape is rabies, and there is also canine distemper. And interestingly, the population of wild dog in Laikipia has been oscillating a lot, with periods when populations increase and periods when they dropped almost local extinction. So Rosie and her team have been monitoring these population dynamics and monitoring movement of wild dog, and also engaging the local communities in interventions to reduce retaliatory attacks on wild dogs, but also to help promote coexistence in the landscape. This is again one of the long-term exclosure experiments. At Mpala, there are various exclosure experiments. The Kenya long-term exclosure experiment consists of different plots that are fenced. You can see the fences on the left here. And this, using different types of fences, you can actually keep away different combinations of animals. And what that could mean is you are mimicking different extinction scenarios. For example, if you fence out elephants, you basically can test questions around what would happen in this landscape if all elephants were extinct. And also, what would happen, for example, if you remove all forms of wildlife and remain with only cattle? So there are different sets of fenced plots that allow only certain groups of animals to come through. And this has been running since 1995. One thing interesting about this kind of long-term plots is that the longer they stay, the higher the value they gain. But as you may guess, the longer you keep an exclosure, the more it becomes attractive to elephants and all the other animals. So oftentimes there is a lot of breakages of the fences in these plots. And what animals are looking for are the things that are growing in the fenced plots that are not anywhere outside of the plot, outside of the fenced plots. So really, some of the highlights of this work is just that different groups have really dramatic impacts on the vegetation, and exclusion of those groups could change the whole community assembly in very dramatic ways. And this is one of the really productive experiments with more than 150 publications that are being produced from work conducted just within these herbivore exclosures, looking at different aspects of community assembly, from soils and impact on soils, to microbial communities, to really herbaceous vegetation, and even to trees and understanding the responses therein. I say there are many exclosures, again, testing different things. So we consider this as one of the valuable infrastructures at Mpala that you can actually understand the implications of herbivores in this system. This is, again, one of the other exclosures in this area, again, looking at how interactions between various groups of herbivores may actually be shaped by variations in rainfall. You'd think all the research happens here revolves around animals, and sure enough, a lot of that is revolving around cattle. And Wilfred Odadi has been testing different grazing intensities of cattle and trying to understand what are the implications for a land that is intensively grazed, and how that effect may vary from a land that is moderately grazed. And increasingly now he's looking at governance structures, how even with the changes in the cultures of the pastoral communities, how that is impacting on the land in terms of, for example, in the past, it would be the elders making decisions on where to graze and the number of animals to graze and when to move from one area to another. But that, again, is increasingly getting eroded. So under the new dispensation where almost everybody is doing whatever they feel or they deem necessary in the land, how is that going to impact on pastoralism as we have previously thought of it? How is it going to impact on the rangelands? There's again also this really ambitious plot where led by Forest Geo, an organ of the Smithsonian, and what they are doing is monitoring tree dynamics in a big scale. So many times when we're doing vegetation monitoring, we kind of tend to concentrate on small transects and or small plots, but this is really an ambitious project looking at 120 hectares of land where every single tree in that piece of land has been tagged, has been mapped, and they are monitoring that every 5 years, just coming, measuring this diameter at the same site as was measured 5 years ago and seeing how much growth has occurred. These kind of experiments allow you to understand processes from community perspective and may capture patterns that may not be apparent when you just do this kind of monitoring on a small plot or even at a transect level. But even as we venture into the world of technology with use of LiDAR and other airborne surveys, you can actually use the data that has been collected in this kind of large plots to calibrate those advanced technology, advancements in technology. And exactly they are doing that. One beauty about this project, as many other projects that are conducted at Mpala, most of this data is really available. And one of the things that we try to encourage at Mpala is to encourage collaborations. So really, if there are ideas that you think valuable and you want to test using the data already collected, there is no need of reinventing the wheel. You can actually have access to that data and test it and address the questions that may be complementary to the goals of this project. I will stop myself because there is really a lot of research to talk about, but I cannot escape mentioning this work led by Professor Naomi Pierce, is a professor at Harvard University. She's testing many aspects of plant-insect interactions. And one of the things that she's interested in is mutualism and how disturbances such as fire could actually interfere with mutualism. And one of the brilliant papers she has published out of this work is the idea that plants can actually translocate nutrients when they detect approaching fire, and they translocate nutrients from the leaves, from the stem, and they take them to the roots. And this is in response to smoke. Of course, smoke would indicate fire is approaching. So really, if plants can actually mobilize nutrients from leaves and take them into safe custody in the roots, then that of fire and plants in this system, ideally just to enforce the idea that fire is a dominant player and influence in this particular savanna ecosystem. We're also looking at various aspects. Invasive species is also one of the areas that we are looking at, and biological controls that can be used to reduce some of these invasive species. And away from research, I said I'm going to stop myself because we can talk about research over and over for hours on end, but I want to stop myself there. At least that gives you a sense of the various research opportunities and work that we are doing at Mpala. But we don't just stop at research, we also do a lot of outreach activities. One of the hallmarks of these outreach activities is the rabies vaccination campaign, where we have sending teams out to the communities to vaccinate domestic dogs against rabies. You may know that rabies is a fatal disease and one of the neglected diseases of Africa, and has major impact not only on domestic animals, but also on wild carnivores. And in fact, it also affects human beings. We estimate around 20,000 deaths from rabies every year, and that's a significant number. And really, just how to control rabies, you can actually eradicate rabies through regular vaccination or sustained vaccination campaigns. We used to have a lot of cases of rabies, but since this project started in 2015, those cases have really subsided, and we have not had any major outbreak of rabies in Laikipia County. And we think it's really just because every year we're sending teams out to the communities to vaccinate their dogs and consequently reduce disease burden on both domestic and wild animals. We're also interacting with the schools at the level of, even training their teachers. And one thing, when you train teachers, they can actually confer the same message of conservation to the kids when they're teaching them in school. So this project has been focusing on the children at earlier stages of learning. And the approach to this is bring their teachers on several days workshops, train them, and then they become trainers of the kids in the school where they teach. Also, Mpala hosts a number of workshops and seminars. These are just pictures from some of the seminars. We bring communities from the neighborhood. We also bring private ranchers. We bring various stakeholders in the region to just share highlights of the work that is conducted at Mpala. Mpala is also supporting quite a number of entrepreneurship projects in the communities around, working with women groups, and also providing services like hospitals and also clean water. Recently completed this borehole that has a promise for providing water to some of the communities around. And in this just is, again, a way of building good relationships with the communities, but also, spreading impact beyond the Mpala itself. I want to stop there, and I will take any questions that you may have.
Wow, it's amazing how much you have going on there. I'm blown away. Thank you for sharing so much. I want to encourage everyone to put questions in the chat or go ahead and raise your hand. If Philippe, go ahead.
So one of the things that occurred to me as you're doing a presentation on the research, and I have to say that was a really excellent summary. The research at Mpala really spans a broad series of scales. I mean, from landscape to genomic. I mean, so there's just an incredible scale variation in the research. And I'm wondering if Mpala ever does anything to sort of formally encourage the integration of those various research projects across those scales, because I mean it's really remarkable the way you're looking from everything from genetic and coevolution activities in individual organisms to landscape scale changes. And so, but integrating that is always a huge challenge. And I'm just wondering if there's any way in which Mpala is able to facilitate that.
Thank you, Felipe. That's a really good question. And I would also welcome my colleagues, Nelly and Cosmas, to weigh in. But my take to that is one of the areas that we could think of like we're falling behind. That kind of research integration into bigger picture, and it's an area that we would really benefit a lot from collaborations from people in kind of these networks, but also, if you have suggestions on how that could be possible.
Well, I was just thinking about that because I have to say Mpala probably has one of the most diverse portfolios of research I've seen, and I've visited a lot of field stations. And the one thing I have seen done in a couple of different field stations at Andrews Experimental Forest, and I've seen it done at some LTER sites and at Jasper Ridge, is having actual workshops where the researchers meet to talk about ways in which that can programmatically be integrated. But I think that might be something worth thinking about, because I mean, your portfolio is absolutely staggering.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's an area we can, we do some regular workshops, but we haven't approached from the level of integration of all the pieces in there.
What you might do is send an email out on the OBFS list server to other field stations to see what they've done, and that'll probably generate some ideas that I certainly haven't been exposed to.
Lovely.
I've got a question kind of related, and you're supporting all of these different researchers. How many do you often have at one time, and how many full-time staff do you have in terms of logistically supporting all of these projects?
Great. Cosmos, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, please. I can respond to that. So thank you very much for the question. So we have tentatively 250 staff at Mpala working all around, and that incorporates the management team, the research assistants, the security team, catering, accommodation, name it. So all of us support research and science, and everybody comes in to provide any logistical support that they are requested to do. Name it accommodation department, security, and all that. So in a year, we are able to accommodate approximately between 1,000 and 2,000 researchers and students. And accumulatively, that comes to 14,000, what Dr. Kimuyu mentioned, 14,000 bed nights in a year. So we have periods that we are very busy and periods that we are less busy. For example, from January all the way to March will be it's normally quite a busy period. And then it slows down a bit in April and May. And then June and July are the busiest months. They have been competing. June and July have been competing which month is busier than the other. And mostly July takes it. So, and then now the number starts going down from August, September, and then from October we are we are talking around 30 researchers approximately per day. But in June, July, we are talking about 100 researchers and students across. And then January to March, we are talking about 60 to 80 researchers in a day. So that's the number of people that we support and facilitate. And facilitation here means ensuring that when these students, rather student groups and researchers send an email saying that we want to come to Mpala to do research, our work starts from there. So we provide all the support from, facilitating invitation letters, facilitating immigration and customs until they get to, getting them from the airport to Mpala, ensuring that they have a place to sleep, ensuring that they have food to eat, water to shower. We also ensure that we do laundry for them, and then all through their stay to the time that they're going back home. And so ours is basically to just ensure that when you get to Mpala, you are able to concentrate on research and so, because we know it's not easy to be in the field the whole day. Then you're coming in the evening, you're very tired, and you need to prepare your meal. So we come in there and ensure that you have a meal you have something to eat before you go to bed, so that you are energetic enough to wake up again tomorrow very early to go back to the field, considering that some field work start as early as 5 a.m. in the morning. So we come in, ensure that you got everything that you need. And when we are giving briefings when you get to Mpala, we ensure that we tell you that in case you have any request, may it be special request or just general request, we allow you to pass it to some of our staff or ourselves, depending on what the request is, and you are assured that you'll get that support and you'll only concentrate with science.
Wow. And one follow-up question to that is, you had mentioned in the presentation that the data collected from the different research teams are often shared. How are you capturing that? Because for our little station, which we can handle maybe 2 or 3 teams at a time at most, but just getting back some of that valuable data beyond what's published in publications. I'm curious what your process is.
Yes, that's a good one. We, at the moment, don't have a central repository. We have some repository for some of the common data, like, rainfall and GIS layers and some of those basic data sets. But at the moment, most of the research projects are kind of managing their own database with websites where you can actually click and request for the data. But it's in one of the things that we're planning to do, actually. We're building a repository where this data can be archived and can be retrieved, obviously with the right guidelines on data sharing policy and all that. So it's something that we are actively now engaged in, seeing how we can actually centralize the repository for all that data.
Yes, and strongly that came from Felipe. It came from the strategic plan that you helped us put together. That was one of the issues that really was plugged out, and part of the implementation now is setting up the full research department with a full chief research officer and getting all the IT support in terms of building those systems and having all the information gathered, because as Dr. Kibuyu said, that we are also responsible for the county and the national kind of work that they do here. And most of the time we also ask as an institution to contribute some data, some information that could help with policy. And if we just have people come in, do and go without having that kind of platform to share the data, then we also don't have quite good impact as an institution. So that came up as one of the items really to be implemented through the strategic plan, and it's what we are set to do as part of our work plan for this year.
I don't know if you noticed in the chat a question from Maggie that I thought is just fabulous, and I'd really be interested in hearing a response to that.
I was just going to read it, Philippe. Do you want to read it? If you've had a chance to process it. Okay, I'll go ahead. So Maggie writes, and yeah, Maggie, you're still here. So, so she thanks you for the fascinating talk, and the scope of the research is amazing. It is. She's interested in your perspectives about this often challenging interface between various land uses, human, livestock, wildlife, and manipulative research. At her station, they have some similar challenges on a much smaller scale, sharing the research landscape with human recreational uses, wildlife conservation efforts, agriculture, and livestock. So she's curious if any specific internal policies, outreach efforts, or other approaches to these challenges have made a particularly strong positive impact for you, and what are the most challenging and most rewarding elements of sharing space with these overlapping land uses? Great question, and there it is.
From research perspective, I actually think of the different land uses as actually a blessing in disguise, in a sense that you know, you can actually understand processes from different perspectives, and also there are insights you can draw, for example, working in a group ranch where there's intensive grazing that you may not be able to see from a private ranch or any other different kind of land use. So in a way that broadens the scope of the kind of questions that we can address research-wise, but in a sense also it's a platform where you can actually communicate findings that are relevant to management of the land, of the landscape, in the sense that we normally, of course, hold workshops where we invite different managers, different land use owners to share insights and, you know, have discussions around what land use options could benefit particular goals, and, you know, how that plays out in terms of, you know, even just the livelihood. So we sitting in a landscape where these different land uses become part of the research questions that we address, but again, in the sense that we also provide feedback in ways that we can, of course, encourage, for example, productivity of the land. We involved in restoration projects in the communities. We also, you know, just exploring different scenarios in which, you know, you can maximize on productivity, you can minimize on the conflicts. In terms of research, there's a bit of some challenges. For example, could it be that it's a camera trap out there, and for one reason or another, somebody just vandalizes it? It's a bit of, there's a bit of challenge, but we haven't noted much of that in terms of, in the sense that a lot of the communities where we are working with understand the value of research, and we are in constant engagement that they understand part of what we're doing. So I don't know whether Nelly wants to add to that.
Yes, I just wanted to add something small internally from a land use perspective in terms of management, that Mpala made a decision not to do tourism around Mpala, because most of these conservancies around us would be doing ranching and tourism and, you know, conservation as part of, you know, economic benefit from the land. But because we really wanted to stay on course to do research, we did not want to compete with tourism, because once you introduce recreation tourism, managing all the logistics of, you know, tourism and all the demands of keeping up with that industry would really derail us in terms of spending investment, time, logistics, you know, staff and all that. So Mpala decided to not do tourism, unlike all the conservancies around us, and stick on research. Recently, also, they had had a ranching activity as part of, investment to make money that would be invested back into research. But because of all the challenges that Dr. Kimuyu has brought out in his presentation, it started to become more of the ranch with a research center rather than the research center with a ranch. That meant most of our funding, even now for research, were going into keeping the ranching business afloat. Again, that was taking us away from managing the whole, research center here. So we decided again to downsize on our livestock and dedicate what remained for research. So now it's not a commercial venture anymore. It is just livestock that is meant for research purpose. So again, that was returned back to research so that we're not talking commercial at the same time doing research. So that was just to balance out, because when you have too much going and different land use, it can really be tough in terms of balancing it to ensure that you conserve, because everything is about sustainability, so that now we can focus more on research and conservation, because we need to restore, as Dr. Kimuyu says, because we need the research going. So any activity that then will put that in jeopardy is something that we have reconsidered. And through that strategic plan, looking at how we can focus to just conserve the land, manage it better, and then dedicate it to research as, an asset.
That makes so much sense. I've got one. Oh, Philippe, did you have a question? I had one more. Basically, you mentioned a teacher workshop, one that focused on conservation and the outreach. So the idea is that the teachers can then become your messengers in some ways with the message that you're putting out there. And I'm curious what that message is, what that looks like for the teachers.
Sorry, before Duncan responds to that, I would like to weigh in on the previous question.
Absolutely.
Yes, so it's the same question that has led to the formation of a very instrumental umbrella body by the name Laikipia Conservancies Association, which incorporates both private and community ranches coming together to discuss issues: climate change, pastoralism, human-wildlife conflict, the carbon market, which is very key at the moment. And we have seen quite a lot of benefit being part of that organization. Actually, Nelly sits in the board of that organization, representing Mpala as a member, and we have really seen quite a lot of benefit, because even security, bringing together security, handling the area as one, supporting one another in terms of, especially when we have invasions in some of the ranches, we support one another. So there's quite a lot of benefit in bringing together all those ranches and community properties doing different things in terms of landscape use, and that has really been instrumental to Mpala.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cosmas, for that. Yeah, in terms of messaging, in terms of what we're packaging to the school kids, to the teachers, to of course convey that to the school kids, they're just simple environmental conservation messages packaged in a way that can be understood by the kids, and in a way that the kids can also have conversations with their parents about the same, so that the message is not actually just stopping at the kids. The kids can engage their parents. And these are simple conservation lessons like, okay, how do you know this is a zebra, different zebra from this other one? How can you harvest rainwater? How can you reduce soil erosion? How can you know when you're losing? How can you deal, for example, with a species? How can you know invasive species? Simple lessons like plays, mimicking different animals and animal sounds and all that. And through this, it's just some way to spark curiosity on the kids. And this was actually came out from the realization that the current, curriculum for schools at this level lacks enough content on environment and aspects of conservation. And when you miss it from that level, when kids are still young, then it becomes really difficult for kids to start catching up much later. So it's just influencing them from very formative stages of education to understand this is the landscape we are sitting in. These are the conservation issues. This is the importance, for example, of wildlife and all that, and in messages that they can understand themselves, but also can convey to their parents.
And just to give you numbers, we are working with 19 schools currently around just the landscape around us, just from Mpala in our community area, 19 of them. And it grew, of course, from 3 to 5 to 12 to all the way to 19. And part of what the team also does is they visit schools and sometimes are able to take up lessons just beyond the school hours when the children break into clubs, different clubs. And so there's a conservation club where you go in there and you teach them a lesson for the day, and you create for them, like plant trees sometimes, or make a library, encourage them to read more on environment. Some of them have planted very beautiful trees around their schools, and just have this conservation messaging and talks so that you can have more of them think of becoming researchers or conservationists, because when you ask these children, they want to be pilots and they want to be teachers and everything else. So how can we bring more to want to do research and conservation related kind of career or growth in future?
At the top of the hour. Thank you for that answer so much. These answers and the conversation has given me a lot of ideas, at least for my station, and hopefully the rest on the call as well. Does anyone have any more questions? Do we have any more time, or people who can stay on? I know we're only going to go an hour, but Philippe is.
I can't resist. The conversation elicited an idea that occurred to me for another virtual cafe. And that is because I know of a couple of other field stations that are struggling with how to integrate ranching activities with research and teaching. For instance, there's the Canyonlands Research Center in southern Utah, Archbold Biological Station in Florida. There's Kanza Prairie in Kansas. Most of the ones I know, of course, are the US based. But it occurs to me that it might be a useful conversation to find out how other field stations deal with ranching activities, and also being able to promote research and teaching. And so it's just a thought to think about. But Mpala's experiences, I think, would be really valuable. And I think the experiences of some of these other sites might prove to be a really valuable opportunity for that kind of virtual cafe.
I can add that in Mexico at our station, we have a regenerative ranching project going on.
All right.
So it's very close.
I know there are more. I can imagine, yeah.
Very close to our work right now as
and,
well.
And I have to say, when I retired from Jasper Ridge, one of the things we were thinking about was bringing ranching back onto the property, because we could see real restoration benefits from doing that. And so it's, sometimes it goes in surprising directions, but it's something that might be worth having a really good conversation about.
Terrific. Thank you for that,
I
Philippe.
agree.
And any other virtual cafe ideas that have come out of this, feel free to contact myself, Rhonda Strumminger. I realize I've got OBFS down there, so I didn't actually introduce myself to those who might not know me on the call. And my co-chair, David Manelli, is on the call as well. So you can let us know if you have other ideas. Thank you so much. Anyone else, any other comments, or we can wrap it up? Thank you for your time. I know it's late in Kenya. So
Happy New Year's to all of you.
Thank you.
Great seeing you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all
Inspiring.
so much. Very much.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye. Okay.
Bye, Rhonda. Take care.
Thanks, you too. Ciao.